Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Krista Marie, and I serve as AHOA's Education Manager. As the association continues to fuel hotel owners with resources, we are pleased to welcome back Tarun Kapoor from Kapoor & Kapoor Hospitality Consultants. In this session, he will address the structure and format of a successful interview and the need for situation-based questions with desired answers that focus on the skills, knowledge, and abilities needed, while also ensuring the candidate is both service-oriented and a good fit with your team. Before handing this over to Tarun, please take note of this disclaimer. Q&A will be available at the end of the conclusion for the presentation for any of your questions. Please type them into the question section and take advantage of this opportunity to ask what is on your mind, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Today's presentation will also be available for viewing within 24 hours on our COVID-19 research page at ahoa.com. We are excited for you here today, so I welcome Tarun to begin.
Well, thank you, Ashley. It's great to be back and welcome everybody. So today I'm continuing with the series Employer of Choice, and as you all know, this is a very, very, very difficult labor market. I don't know, every one of the people I work with complains about there just isn't anybody who wants to come and work. And even if somebody applies, they never show up for the interview. If they show up for the interview, they never show up for the job. And if they show up for the job, they may not last a few days and then they quit. So this is a very difficult labor market. So the real premise of this series is you have to be known as the best hotel on your exit, the best hotel in your comp set, the best employer in your comp set. And people have to realize that working for you is far more enjoyable, far more beneficial than working for your competitors. So the employer of choice. Now, as you know, in the last 3 or 4 of series, I've been using different metaphors, and I talk about the employer of choice. There really is no secret to it, other than the fact that the entire employment cycle has to be executed very professionally and very well. Last time I used the metaphor of a bicycle wheel, and I used the idea that there are many spokes, and any one spoke that is broken or weak could actually completely ruin the bicycle ride and possibly not get you to your destination. So that could be recruiting as something you don't do well. It could be selection as something that we don't do well. It could be the lack of offering a job in a more professional manner. Do we have job descriptions, etc., everything on this slide. But I do think it's critical to know that at the core of everything we do as an employer of choice is in recognizing, do we have an effective job description? If you have an effective job description, you know who to recruit. You know how to select from the pool of qualified candidates. You know what to offer in that job offer letter. You know how to onboard the new hire. You know how to train the new hire. You know how to evaluate the performance of the new hire. And you also know how to provide recognition and rewards and incentives to the new employee. So at the core of this is job descriptions. Now, I would assume you all have job descriptions. My question to you would be, when was the last time you looked at your job description? My second question would be, when was the last time you showed the job description to your employees? And when was the last time that you and your employees sort of agreed to what it is that you expect them to do and what it is that they are actually doing. So to me, this job description is a critical piece, and it's something that we neglect. If you need job descriptions, you have my contact information. You can call me. I'll send you some samples. But your brands, if you're a branded hotel, your brands have job descriptions, and they're available a dime a dozen. That being said, though, I would strongly urge you to customize your job description to your hotel, to your position, and to the way you want to run your business. So, what are the different components of this job description? Well, clearly the title. Who am I going to be working for? Who's my supervisor going to be? What qualifications, minimum qualifications at that, do you want to put for the job? If you can't stipulate the qualifications, then de facto you have to allow me in whether I qualify or not. What is it that my job is supposed to entail? The summary of the job, the primary functions of the job. What is that? And then number 5, the specific tasks, the detail of the job. So if you really take number 4 and number 5, number 4 is the summary, the overview, the why are you hiring me, and the number 5 is the details of what you expect me to do. So I want you to focus on those. Now, whether we are looking at this for a general manager's position, whether we're looking at this for a department head's position, whether it's a guest services manager or an executive housekeeper, or whether we are looking at this for a room attendant's position or guest service representative's position, think about it for a moment. Let's take a guest service representative. What is the primary function of a guest service representative? What is it? Because if you say it properly, then I know what you expect me to do. Is it guest service? Is it ensuring that my customers' needs are being taken care of? What about a guest room attendant? What's the primary function of a guest room attendant? Is it to make sure that every room is ready to sell to the brand standards? And then what detailed tasks do you want me to do? And in the detailed tasks is the laundry list of detailed tasks. Do you want me to clean the toilet? Do you want me to clean the bath, the shower? Do you want me to clean the sink? Do you want me to replace the towels? Do you want me to replace half-used bottles of shampoo? Etc., etc., because the devil, as you know, is in the details. And finally, what I like to put in every job description is the minimum performance standard. And I underline the word minimum, not maximum, because what I don't want to do is scare my employees away by setting high standards. But what I do want to say to my employees is, for you to work at my hotel, to work to the way we like to run our hotel, these are our minimum standards. Now, the cliche minimum standards would be, what quality assurance score do you want me to have? If you were to inspect my room and I'm a room attendant, would you expect me to have a 90% passing score, or 95% passing score, or a 75% passing score? So stop and think about that, right? 75 sounds decent, but the fact of the matter is, if you have only a minimum standard of 75 in an inspection, then hair in the bathtub, or a drain that doesn't drain, or stains on my bed sheets are all within the confines of 75 out of 100 in the scoring system. So what are your minimum performance standards going to be? And are those performance standards specific to that job description, specific to the primary functions and the specific tasks that you would like me to do? So Assuming you've got a well-written job description, and as we talked about the last time, assuming you're using some kind of a human resource information system, and as you know, all of these systems have applicant tracking systems, well, then when you place an ad for a position and that ad gets blitzed through all these different search engines, well, that ad that can then have the minimum standards for the job. So the minimum standards could be, possibly should be, what you think are necessary. If you say you're not going to hire me as a guest service representative at your front desk if I don't have a minimum of 6 months or a year of hotel front desk experience, then stipulate that as a minimum standard. It will reduce the pool of qualified candidates, but at least you know the people coming to you are coming to you with some experience and some knowledge. But I think on this slide, I think the most important piece really is these three words. What skills does the candidate need to have to do the job? What knowledge does the candidate need to have to do the job? And what abilities does the candidate need to have to do the job? And I think often, at least at the frontline level in our hotels, we forget these three words and we end up hiring the cliche warm body. And then we are stuck with the warm body syndrome, which is you're hiring people that may or may not have skills to do the job. Now, let's talk about skills, let's talk about knowledge, and let's talk about abilities. Obviously, the job description describes the skills, the knowledge, and the abilities I need to have. So what knowledge do I need to have? Well, how do I clean marble if I'm a room attendant? How do I clean a shower if I'm a room attendant? What do I need to do in terms of sanitizing a room? That's knowledge. Now, that knowledge can be given to me by you. You can train me when you hire me. So you could have a lower standard saying, maybe in my interview, I don't need to make sure this person has the knowledge, but I want to make sure that I can train the person, give the person the knowledge they need. Abilities. If you ask me to make a bed, I can make one bed. You ask me to make 15 beds. This man cannot do it. This man's back cannot do it. I physically am not capable of doing it. So are you even ensuring when you are interviewing people whether these folks have the abilities to do the kind of job that they're being considered for? And lastly, do I have the skills to do the job? Clearly, the skills for a guest service representative at the front desk are quite different than a guest room attendant in housekeeping to do their job. Now, when you are selecting people, some jobs might warrant different methods of selection. Probably the most common method of selection is interviewing. And yet I think it's probably the most abused system of interviewing. I can't tell you how many interviews I've sat at or sat in on where the interviewer is doing the talking. Well, why are we doing an interview if I'm going to do the talking? Good interviewers ask questions. Good interviewers evaluate the candidate. They evaluate the candidate to see, is the candidate right for the company, the culture of our company? Is a candidate right for my hotel, whether it's a branded hotel or an independent hotel, whether it's a 4-diamond hotel or a 1-diamond hotel? is the candidate right for my hotel? And most importantly, is the candidate right for the job? So I've often said that I am not the right person for many jobs in a hotel. I'm probably the right person for other jobs in a hotel. There's sometimes we never test, but for certain jobs and certain tasks, testing might be a nice way to go. For example, if you want the candidate to be able to have some fundamental knowledge of Excel and be able to prepare some spreadsheets, especially if you're using your night auditor to do some reporting for you, well, then maybe we need to measure the fact, can this person create a spreadsheet? And it's perfectly okay in that interview or in that selection process that we give the person a test to make sure they can create a spreadsheet. It might be okay to even have a candidate clean a bathroom or clean a toilet or ask for questions to see do they have the knowledge of how to clean certain things. References. Do you even do a reference check? Because references sometimes very subtly tell you a lot about the candidate. And lastly, background check. In this day and age, I would suggest that you do a background check on every new employee. Now, background checks cost money, and usually anywhere between 20 and 40 bucks to do a background check. But is that money well spent? And if you can lower your turnover rate, will you recover your money fast? I would assume yes. So then what I really want you to look at is that interviewing is both science and both an art. And I want to go through some steps that I think are critical in interviewing. Since most of our managers have never taken a course in interviewing, yet they all interview practically every day, if not every week, with the high turnover that we have in our hotels. I think preparing somebody for an interview is important. So I would suggest that you look at the interview as a process. Yeah? The first step in that process is what I'm calling calming the nerves. Most candidates that come on an interview are nervous. So if I can calm their nerves and make them relax and make them not focus on the interview itself, then I'm going to be able to get the best out of the candidate, and that's going to allow me to decide whether this candidate is right for me or not. So in this introductory stage of the interview, in the calming the nerves phase of the interview, maybe you want to talk about the traffic and how good or bad the ride was. Maybe you want to talk about where they came from. Maybe you want to talk about last night's football game. Whatever it is that you want to talk about that sort of takes the focus off this interview is a powerful thing to do. The second thing is every one of these candidates that are being interviewed has either filled out an application, either online or on paper, and in some cases, they've given you a resume. Question is whether what they put in the application and whether what they put in the resume is correct. So it's not a bad idea, again, as easy questions go, as you're calming the nerves and you're moving from talking about possibly the traffic or the weather or sports, you're now moving into saying, tell me about your work experience. And when they're telling me about their work experience, I am trying to verify and I'm trying to validate what they put in the application. Often what people may put in a resume or in an application, they forget. And when they're talking to you face to face, you get a slightly different version. A cliche example was I was interviewing a general manager position for a client of mine just recently, And the person had put on that they were the general manager of ABC Hotel for the last 3 years. Well, it was a well-branded hotel, so we looked at that and said, wow, this candidate is qualified to come and run our hotel. But as we interviewed the candidate, we found out that in fact they were at the job for 3 years, but they started as the AGM, and it was only in the last 2 months when the general manager quit that this person became an interim acting general manager. So as opposed to the resume implying that they had 3 years of experience, they really only had 2 months of experience. And when we started to ask questions, and I like to use situation-based questions, and I'll describe that in a minute. When we started to ask questions, this person really did not have any answers. So now the question is, what knowledge, the K stands for knowledge, what knowledge does a candidate need to have? So if I was looking for a general manager candidate, as I was, I asked the question, how did you folks do budgeting at your last hotel? Well, the answer came that the budget was given to us by corporate. Well, I said, well, what does that mean the budget is given to you by? Who established the revenue goals? Did you have anything to do as general manager with the revenue goals? And because this person was really technically only in AGM, never having participated in the development of the budget, could not answer the question. So their knowledge of budget was very different than somebody who's worked on building a budget. The S stands for skills. What skills do you need to do the job? Well, you need customer service skills. Well, you need leadership skills. Well, you need analytical skills. So we are asking situation-based questions and saying in those questions, how would you have done this if you were at your previous job? So I can ask any number of situation-based questions depending on the skill that I'm looking to measure. Leadership is a good example. Everybody professes to be a good leader. So why don't we ask them a question saying, at your previous hotel, how would you have handled a situation if one of your employees was blatantly lying to you about whatever the case may be? And then the way this person would handle the answer, reflecting back on their previous hotel, allows them to demonstrate what they know or don't know, and allows you to measure whether this person is the right candidate for you and for your hotel. So don't give a preface to the question. Don't tell them what you want the answer to be. Don't do the talking, but instead do the asking and put the person into a situation where they have to explain how they would have done it without knowing what your preference is. So once I have by the way, the vast meat of your questions, the vast majority of your questions are going to be in the section of skills, knowledge, and abilities. That's the critical piece. So once I finish with that, I typically ask my candidate, say, do you have questions for me? Well, when candidates ask questions, what they're really telling you in those questions is what's important to them. So you can decide whatever is important to them is something that you can afford or you can live with or you want. For example, often people will say, well, what benefits do you provide? And then they drill down and say, well, what health benefits do you provide? So if you don't provide health benefits and if you don't plan to provide health benefits, are you listening? This person is demonstrating that it's important to them. Likewise, if you want to ask, if they ask you questions about um, vacation, personal time off, etc., they are demonstrating to you what's important. Then the piece is the how to close the interview. To be the employer of choice, I want every potential candidate to leave the interview wanting to work for me. Even if I have determined through the interview that the candidate doesn't meet the qualifications that I need for the job, I still want that employee to, that potential employee to leave feeling very good about us, very respectful about us, and saying it really would be nice if I could get a job. So I like to say things like, well, we had a very good response to our ad. We are going to be doing interviews the rest of the week, but either way, I'm going to get back to you by the end of the week or by next week, by Monday of next week, and let you know about the next steps. Now, that's just professional, so the candidate knows it'll be Monday before they're going to hear back from me, and they're not calling me and trying to find out what the status is. But then what I like to say to them is, I like to say, but if things change between now and Monday, if you get another job offer, would you give me the courtesy of calling me, letting me know so that I can make a counter? In this market, I don't want to lose the opportunity of losing a viable candidate. So by making them feel that I want them to contact me before they accept another job, makes them feel good, makes me look professional, and I have a better chance of not losing the candidate. So this reviewing the timetable with the applicant, when would we complete the search process, when would we expect the candidate to start work, are all steps in the interview that are very critical. Now, just some closing tips, and then I'll be happy to open it up for questions and answers. I suggest that you have a questionnaire made up. I suggest you use this predetermined format of this questionnaire with the steps and phases that I just finished talking about on all candidates. Because when you use the same interview on all candidates, your selection process becomes far, far more objective than subjective. I always like the idea of having open-ended questions where people don't just say yes or no, but give me an opportunity to do some follow-up questions. Because I think that conversation, that follow-up question, really gives you a much better insight into the candidate. You always want to determine what the potential of the candidate is, what their strengths are, and what you can nurture, if you will, because that's going to keep them happy on the job. So with that being said, and I know I'm pretty much out of time, Kristen, I'll be happy to take questions.
Yes, Tarun, we had some questions come in. I'll get right to it. The first said, what are some ways to help managers to prepare for interviews and listen with candidates?
I'm sorry, can you say it one more time, Kristen, please?
Sure. What are some ways to help managers to prepare for interviews and listen with candidates? That's all it says.
Okay, so I think the first bullet on the slide that's on the screen probably is the single best thing you can do. I think winging it, coming unprepared for an interview means I am not doing my due diligence in terms of deciding what qualifications do I need in the candidate, what skills, knowledge, and abilities do I need in the candidate, not having reflected on the job description and seeing what does this person have to do on the job, so that when I'm asking the questions, I'm asking the right questions. That's, I think, critical. I think the second critical thing is please don't tell the candidate what you want the candidate to say. I cannot tell you how many interviewers preface the question with an answer. So if I was in need of a job, I'm going to be very savvy and say, well, sure, I can do that. I know how to do that. Sure, I agree with you. I can do that. But what you have not determined is whether I have the knowledge or the abilities to do that. So asking these open-ended questions, asking these situation-based questions to see whether I actually can give an answer that is acceptable to you. So you remember when I was talking about the general manager and she's talking about budgeting. Well, everybody knows what a budget is, but I would venture to guess 9 out of 10 of the general managers, at least in the select service sector, probably have never participated in 90%, probably have never participated in the development of a budget. So if you're going to hire this candidate and assume that they can come here and help you develop a budget, well, you are smoking something.
So our next question said, would you suggest a company for background checks?
Absolutely. I think without a doubt, you're hiring people in a hotel who have very intimate involvement in your customers' guest rooms, customers' likenesses, customers' service experience. So not having done a background check in this day and age, to me, doesn't make sense. Now, just about every HRIS system that we've been talking about, they almost all of them have their partners on the platform that do background checks. So I think background checks, you can a dime a dozen companies out there. At minimum, for some positions, like a general manager's position or a department head's position, I would do a nationwide background check. But for line level positions, at minimum, I would do like a 3 or 4 state area background check to make sure that this person does not have a history.
All right. Our next question says, we have had many candidates not show up for their job interviews. What do you think is happening and how can we change that?
Couple of things, and I think in one of my last sessions I mentioned this too. The line level employee coming to a hotel is not a career-minded professional employee that would be coming for a management position at your hotel. So these are people in the need for a job. These are people who need the job and they need it now. So if they applied for a job and you didn't respond to their application in a very timely, very professional manner, there's a good chance that they've applied for 3 other jobs and they're going to take the first job that they get. So the first message here is we have to be timely, we have to be professional. The second thing is you're not going to email me, don't even call me, because often people don't even answer their phones if they don't recognize the number. I don't know how many times today my phone is rung, and if I don't recognize the number, I don't respond. So people today, with all the technology we have, we are weird. So I suggest you text me. Text your candidates. Thank you for your application. We would like to interview you. Now, the sooner you can interview me, the better it is, because I may be distracted with other job offers. So you want to be able to tell your managers, if I'm going to spend the money to advertise for a job, then I'm going to text the candidate and have the candidate come for the interview as soon as possible. Next, if you are going to hire the candidate that's come, then don't defer the job offer and don't defer the actual getting them to start for another few days, because the longer you drag it out, well, they're not making an income and they're going to go somewhere else if they get a quicker option. So I would be very careful about being very expeditious through this process. One last closing thought. You may want to consider some kind of a signing bonus incentive program, which basically says, in professional jobs, giving signing bonuses is very common. My son just got changed jobs and had a signing bonus. The day he signed the job, he got a bonus. But in a line position, we can't afford that luxury. So maybe what you want to do is to say, if you stay with us for 90 days, on your 91st day, you will get a bonus of whatever, 50, $100. And that sometimes shows that you value the candidate.
All right. And our last question says, what happens when your gut tells you that the candidate may not be telling the truth during the interview?
So I think that happens often, doesn't it? But the question is, what are you doing about that gut? So if your gut's telling you this person is not telling the truth, then it's incumbent upon you to validate that gut feeling and by asking follow-up questions. So I think it's critical that if I'm suspicious, without giving my suspicion away, you ask other questions that will allow you to determine whether this person was telling the truth or not. That's why you don't do the talking, you do the listening, you do the asking, you don't do the telling.
All right, great, thank you. So I would like to say thank you again, Tarun and Tarun Kapoor, along with Kapoor and Kapoor Hospitality Consultants, for this informative webinar for all of our members that joined us today. Please tune in Monday, April 5th at 3 p.m. EDT for part 4 of the series, The Employer of Choice. It is all about onboarding, setting the stage with orientation and invest in training. Feel free to visit ahoa.com for future webinars and also find past webinars in our resource library. We hope you have a wonderful day. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar. Thank you, Tarun. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.